Hi everybody, I just wanted to give you some feedback on the corporate social responsibility assignment that you did not last week but the week before. I really took my time going through them. I finally have gotten finished and I just wanted to kind of touch base and also put some up for you as examples of really stellar presentations. So anyway, some general themes that I saw amongst all of your presentations were, I'm just going to check my notes here, a lot of times organizations seem to represent their corporate social responsibility as what's really just kind of business practices. So sort of like offering low prices, helping people stretch their paycheck, let's see, stuff like that. That is not necessarily corporate social responsibility because it does affect their bottom line and they're trying to kind of like undercut and underbid other organizations. So for example, Walmart saying they give low prices so that they could stretch a paycheck doesn't necessarily mean that they are engaging in pro-social practices. It just means that they are trying to undercut the competition. However, I'm sure that they do represent it as social responsibility on their site, which kind of brings me to the thought, and I'm just going to throw out a lot of questions during this time to you guys. Is offering low prices and basically good business practices that do affect the bottom line, where does that fit into, I guess, responsibilities of organizations? So corporate social responsibility is its own thing as we defined it in the lesson, but are organizations responsible for offering the best price possible, or are they responsible to their stakeholders to generate the most income possible? Who are organizations responsible to? Are they responsible to more than one party? And what happens when those parties conflict? And we'll talk about that. We kind of dig into that a little bit throughout the semester, and we'll definitely touch on that when we get to ethics as well. So who does the organization have the bottom line to have responsibility to, or to be faithful to? So if you kind of listen to what you guys said in your presentations, a lot of organizations are kind of putting this as a responsibility to customers under their, I don't know exactly what the tabs were, but whether it's corporate social responsibility or social responsibility, or perhaps it's just in their mission statement, which is something that's very distinct from corporate social responsibility, but it does still speak to the priorities of an organization. So where do fair and ethical business practices fit into the responsibilities of an organization? Not necessarily in line with this particular lesson, but something really good to think about, and something that I can see overlaps, or at least is starting to overlap, with the ideas of corporate responsibility or social responsibility on the organization's website. And so I have a feeling as more and more organizations do this, it's going to become something that's institutionalized. And we talked about when something happens several times on a smaller instance, it becomes institutionalized on a larger scale. So if every organization is saying this, then it becomes the norm for organizations in a particular industry to say. And so based on what you guys reported this week, I can kind of see that that is happening in the business world. So in terms of corporate social responsibility, there seems to be a big focus on employees and a big focus on diversity, and then also frequent use of the word community. And so I think this really captures the heart of what corporate social responsibility is about, especially within the framework of the reading you did. So again, creating these connections, building these micro-level instances of trust that then lead to macro-level or overall levels of trust in society. And so especially when organizations sponsor programs for their employees and or have their pay their employees for their time to do community service, you could imagine that individuals are literally linking up with other individuals. So for example, if organizations have corporate training programs or picnics or special events or exercise classes for their employees, that gives employees who may not otherwise socialize, it literally creates links between those employees. And if they're paying their employees time to go out and volunteer, then they're literally creating links between the individual employees in their organization and the individuals that they go volunteer with. And then on a macro level, they're also aligning their name with the volunteerism. So not only are these individuals linking up, but they're also say it's ShopRite. ShopRite is then linking up with Phil Abundance and getting their name out there as well as a macro level linkage. And if organizations do that time and time again, different organizations practicing that same thing again on an institutional level, then that's truly a macro level effort at making connections, because now as individuals we have more faith in the organizations in society because we see them taking this pro-social behavior, and nonprofits are more and corporations are more likely to link up with each other because it's kind of what's been done. It's institutionalized, and there is this trust that the partnership or the endeavor will go well. So those are some great examples. It sounds like a lot of organizations are putting that, a lot of the Fortune 500 organizations are putting that out there on their websites and doing this. Also, community was defined differently for different organizations. So I know for Johnson & Johnson, when they talk about community, they often sponsor initiatives in developing countries. So they sometimes they have operating companies in those countries, and sometimes they don't. But for example, the Johnson & Johnson community is a world community, and when they talk about community, they're talking about across the world. Other organizations, when they talk about community, I know like Comcast, for example, when they talk about community, they're talking, at least in Philadelphia, about the Philadelphia-based community, so literally the community in which they reside. So community, as used in corporate social responsibility, can mean a wide variety of things. Hopefully you guys all gleaned that from your lesson. But the word community is definitely a buzzword that's been institutionalized. Diversity as well, although I think there was less clarity about how the practice of diversity, right? So a lot of organizations, according to your presentations, emphasize and stress diversity, but I don't know exactly how the organizations are respecting that or putting that into practice. So let's see, what else? So Microsoft also used a good, but kind of like a good phrase. They were good corporate citizens. So again, this idea that we're all members of the same world or the same community, and Microsoft is simply a citizen in it. And what's really interesting about that is organizations are not people. However, they're positing themselves as a person, so kind of giving a personality, giving a citizenship to their organization. So I think that that's also an interesting component of corporate social responsibility. Microsoft was also, according to your presentations, much more specific in the practices that they put into place. So what kind of programs are they running? What are they doing? Of organizations, according to your organizations, really varied in that some organizations just used the buzzwords, said, hey, we're doing good things, we want to be part of the community. Others really went into detail with what they were doing. Which brings me to my next question. Do you think it's important and smart or disingenuous of organizations to share what they're doing? So should organizations be taking these pro-social efforts and not publicizing it, or do you think it's important that they publicize it? And then I'll take that a step further. Do you think it's important just for impressing their stakeholders or creating links with their stakeholders, or do you think it's important because it, again, lets people know that there's this pro-social behavior out there and encourages others to do more because they know that particular organizations are doing it? So really something to think about. A lot of times when we think about doing good deeds, we keep it to ourselves because the important part is the deed itself. However, when it's organizations creating these linkages, is part of the good that they're doing built on publicizing the linkages, which you could argue therefore creates more trust, which creates more linkages. So when you do something good, is it different for an individual than it is for an organization in terms of letting others know that you did it? Finally, I wanted to I usually like to start off the lesson with this question, but since we don't meet face-to-face, I figure now is a good time to pose the question, do you think it's important that organizations do this at all? Do you think corporate social responsibility is important, or do you think really it doesn't matter to you? At least one of you used the word crucial. I think someone else used the word critical. So certainly there is a feeling out there among you that it is important. But in other semesters, I've talked about how I let corporate social responsibility drive a lot of my buying practices. So for a long time, I wouldn't buy from Nike because of the sweatshop issues they were having. I wouldn't buy from Walmart because of how they I've read they've undercut their suppliers and kind of drive smaller businesses out of communities. I go to Whole Foods because they tend to buy locally and offer a lot of local, therefore supporting a local economy. I try to do farmers markets even on top of that, so supporting the local community even more. Let me tell you, it takes a long time for me to do my food shopping, and sometimes it's really hard for me to make a decision about buying because I'm so into figuring out which organizations are ethical and pro-social versus those that aren't. And sometimes I'll give that whole speech in class, and everybody looks at me and says, "It's not important to me. What's important is how good the product is, or what's important is how low the prices are." So something I want you to think about, I built this lesson under the assumption that corporate social responsibility is a good and necessary thing. But is it? Again, I think that's partly subjective, and I think that the simple answer is it's become institutionalized. People come to now expect it of organizations, so to a certain extent, it is very important for organizations to do. But at the end of the day, is it important to you, and do you think it's important to society, and do you think it's important for organizations? So I'll just throw those questions out there to you. One last observation that I want to make about corporate social responsibility is that a lot of times it makes sense if organizations enact their corporate social responsibility in a way that makes sense for their organization. So again, if you think about Whole Foods, if they sponsor farming programs or stuff like that, that is intuitive to their brand, and therefore it comes across as genuine, and it makes a lot of sense. Do you think that's an important part of corporate social responsibility? And did you find any of that when you were doing your research? About your presentations, I would like to say that overall your presentations were awesome. They were good last time when you did the State of the Field, but you guys really took the feedback to heart, and you guys by and large did an amazing job. Your presentations are good, your observations were strong, you followed directions well for the most part. People's presentations were point on, so I'm really pleased with the work that you did this week. So I hope that you enjoyed doing the lessons, and I hope that you really learned a lot from them. And it's Sunday now, so I'll be talking to you again tomorrow as we start the next week. Have a great rest of your weekend.